With a single 5-minute phone call, I systematically dismantled my son-in-law's entire world. I didn't scream or threaten. I just calmly laid out the facts, and then I hung up, knowing his carefully constructed empire, built on my life savings and my daughter's love, was about to implode. You might hear that and think I'm a monster, a cold-hearted, vengeful woman, but you don't know the whole story. You haven't seen the photograph I received while my only child lay unconscious in an ICU bed, fighting for every breath. It's a story I have to tell, because it's about how the deepest love can forge the coldest resolve when faced with the ultimate betrayal. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions about this story in the comments. My world had shrunk to the 4 pale green walls of room 3B. For 3 days, the only sounds I heard were the low hum of machines and the rhythmic, desperate beep of the heart monitor that told me my daughter, Emily, was still alive. That, and the suffocating smell of antiseptic. Before the beeping and the antiseptic smell, my life had a different rhythm, a different scent. It smelled like lemon polish and old books. It sounded like the gentle creak of the floorboards in my small 2-bedroom house, the one I bought after 20 years of working as a night shift nurse. My days were quiet but full. I'd wake with the sun, make a pot of strong black coffee, and sit in the worn burgundy armchair by the living room window. That chair was more than just furniture. It was a witness. It was where I had rocked a feverish Emily to sleep when she was 5, her small head nestled in the crook of my neck. It was where I helped her sound out her first words from a picture book, her little finger tracing the letters. The velvet on the armrests was worn smooth, a testament to decades of worry, of comfort, of a life built for 2. My life had been a series of careful calculations and sacrifices, all for her. After her father left when she was just a toddler, it was just us against the world. I worked double shifts at the hospital, my feet aching and my eyes heavy, but I'd always come home with enough energy to check her homework and pack her lunch for the next day. I saved every extra dollar, not for a fancy vacation or a new car, but for her college fund. Watching her walk across that graduation stage, diploma in hand, was the proudest day of my life. She was my masterpiece, a vibrant, compassionate young woman with a talent for painting that could steal the breath from your lungs. Her canvases filled my house with color, a stark contrast to the quiet, predictable life I had always led. Then came Mark. He was handsome, ambitious, and he looked at Emily like she was the only person in the universe. He had a way of speaking about the future that made it sound not just possible, but inevitable. He talked about building a tech company from the ground up, an app that would revolutionize graphic design. He said it was all for Emily, to give her the financial freedom to paint without worrying about selling her work. I wanted to believe him. For my daughter's sake, I chose to believe him. I saw the way her eyes lit up when he entered a room, the way she leaned into him as if he were her anchor. How could I deny her that happiness? I remember the day he asked for the money with perfect clarity. It was a Sunday afternoon in early October, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. We were in the living room. I was in my burgundy armchair, and he and Emily sat on the sofa opposite me, holding hands. He had laid out his business plan, document 101A, on my coffee table. It was filled with charts and projections that meant little to me. What I understood was the look on my daughter's face, a mixture of hope and adoration. "Sarah," Mark began, his voice earnest and smooth, "I'm so close. The initial investors are in, but I need one final push to secure the server infrastructure. A $50,000 seed investment. It's the last piece of the puzzle." He paused, looking from me to Emily. "This isn't just for me. This is for us, for our future. I'll pay you back, with interest, within 2 years, I swear it." $50,000. It wasn't just a number. It was my entire retirement savings. The sum total of every skipped vacation, every worn-out pair of shoes, every lonely holiday I'd worked. It was my security, my safety net, for the slow, quiet years ahead. I looked at the checkbook on the side table. Then I looked at Emily. Her expression wasn't greedy or demanding. It was just full of love for this man. She believed in him completely. And in that moment, her belief was enough for me. My future didn't matter as much as hers. I stood up, walked to the old wooden desk in the corner, and wrote the check. My hand was steady. I wrote out the full amount, $50,000.00, payable to his new company, M Designs, Inc. As I handed it to him, my fingers brushed his. His skin was cool. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, his eyes gleaming. "You will never, ever regret this. I'm going to build an empire for your daughter." He hugged me, a quick, almost formal embrace. I remember the faint, expensive scent of his cologne. That night, Emily called me, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, you made his dream come true," she said. "Our dream. He's already naming his first big project after me." I smiled, sinking back into my burgundy chair. The worn velvet felt like a familiar comfort. I had invested my past and my future into my daughter's happiness. It felt right. It felt like the only thing a mother could do. I had no idea that the empire he planned to build would be constructed on a foundation of lies, and that its first casualty would be the very person he swore to protect. The first few months after I wrote that check were a blur of optimism. M Designs, Inc. was officially launched, and Emily would call me almost every day, her voice a symphony of excitement. She'd talk about the new office space they were leasing, the graphic designers they were interviewing, and the sleek, minimalist logo Mark had designed. He was working 18-hour days, she'd say, pouring everything he had into their future. I'd listen, sitting in my burgundy armchair, and feel a quiet, profound satisfaction. My sacrifice was bearing fruit. I had done the right thing. My daughter was happy, and her future was secure. The change was gradual. So subtle, in fact, that at first, I dismissed it as my own overcautious nature. It started with the Sunday dinners. They had been our tradition for years, a simple meal of roast chicken and potatoes in my small, cozy dining room. But soon, Mark began suggesting we go out instead. To new, expensive restaurants downtown, where a single plate of food cost what I used to spend on a week's worth of groceries. He would insist on paying, flashing a new platinum credit card. "This is the life I want for Emily," he'd announced to the table, though he was really speaking to me. "Only the best." I'd smile and nod, but a small, cold knot would tighten in my stomach. The 2-year repayment promise he had made felt more and more like a distant echo. Then came the comments about my house, the home I had poured my life into, the one where every scratch on the wooden floor told a story of Emily's childhood. One evening, as he stood in the living room waiting for Emily, he ran his hand over the worn velvet of my armchair. "You know, Sarah," he said, his tone light and casual, "we could get you a whole new set of furniture, something modern. This place has good bones, but it's a bit dated." He didn't look at me when he said it, his eyes scanning the room as if he were assessing a property for renovation. He was looking at my life's work, my sanctuary, and seeing only a project to be fixed. He was looking at my memories and calling them old. Emily came down the stairs then, and the moment passed, but the word hung in the air between us. Dated. The real crack appeared on a Tuesday in late March, about 6 months after I'd given him the money. I had called Emily to see if she wanted to go with me to the nursery to pick out flowers for my garden, another one of our spring traditions. Mark answered her phone. His voice was clipped, impatient. "She's in a meeting, Sarah. We're in the middle of a critical development phase." "Oh, of course," I said quickly. "I'm sorry to bother you. Just tell her I called." I was about to hang up when I remembered a letter I'd received. "Mark, while I have you, I got a notice from the bank about a quarterly tax payment for self-employed individuals. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of the April 15th deadline for your business filings." It was a simple reminder, the kind of practical advice a mother gives. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a heavy, loaded silence. Then he sighed, a sound of pure condescension. "Sarah, with all due respect, I have a team of accountants for that. This isn't like managing a nurse's pension plan. We're dealing with venture capital and equity distribution. It's a bit more complex." His words were like tiny shards of glass. He wasn't just dismissing my concern. He was dismissing me. My entire life of careful, responsible planning was being mocked as simple, as quaint. "I was only trying to help," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I know," he said, and the feigned warmth in his voice was worse than the scorn. "And we appreciate it. But you can relax. Your investment is safe." "Now, I really have to go. We're changing the world here." He hung up before I could reply. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air. The smell of lemon polish suddenly seemed faint, overpowered by a phantom scent of his expensive cologne. He hadn't called it a loan, he'd called it your investment. A subtle shift in language, but it changed everything. A loan is a debt, a promise between two people. An investment is a gamble, a risk you take. He was telling me, in his own arrogant way, that my $50,000, my entire future, was now just a chip in his high-stakes game. I walked into the living room and sank into my burgundy armchair. The worn velvet no longer felt like a comfort. It felt like the threadbare fabric of a life I was slowly, terrifyingly, losing control of. The call came on a Thursday evening, just as a soft gray rain began to fall, tapping against the window panes of my living room. Mark's voice was too bright, too cheerful. "Sarah, we have the most fantastic news. We're coming over. Don't start dinner, we'll bring something incredible." He hung up before I could respond. An hour later they arrived, not with pizza or takeout, but with two sleek leather-bound portfolios and an air of triumphant finality. Mark was wearing a tailored navy blue suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Emily trailed behind him, her face pale and her smile looking like it was pinned in place. She avoided my eyes. Mark didn't bother with small talk. He placed his portfolio on my polished oak coffee table, the one that had held decades of family photo albums and Emily's crayon drawings. He opened it with a flourish, revealing architectural renderings of a gleaming, glass-walled condominium. "Sarah," he began, his voice booming with forced enthusiasm, "we've come up with the perfect solution for your retirement. A way to guarantee your financial security and unlock the true potential of your assets." He gestured around my living room, at the walls filled with Emily's paintings, at the bookshelves overflowing with worn paperbacks. "This place has served its purpose, but it's time to modernize." I said nothing. I just sat in my burgundy armchair, my hands resting on the worn velvet arms, feeling the familiar texture beneath my fingertips. My silence seemed to encourage him. He leaned forward, his eyes shining with a predatory gleam. "We had the house appraised, quietly of course. It's worth a surprising amount, just shy of $400,000. After capital gains and fees, you'd clear about $325,000. Cash." He said the word cash like it was a sacred offering. Emily finally spoke, her voice thin and reedy. "Mark, maybe we should slow down?" He waved a dismissive hand at her, never taking his eyes off me. "Nonsense. This is a win-win. We take that $325,000 and inject it directly into M Designs. It's the second-round funding we need to go international. Your initial $50,000 investment will be worth 10 times that within 18 months. You'll move into a luxury condo downtown, no lawn to mow, no roof to fix, and you'll be a majority shareholder in what's about to become a global brand." He smiled, as if he had just handed me the keys to the kingdom. I finally found my voice. It was quiet, but it cut through his monologue like a razor. "This is my home, Mark." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. The condescension I'd heard on the phone weeks ago was back, but now it was in person, thick and suffocating. "Sarah, let's be realistic. It's a building. It's old. It's holding you back. It's holding Emily back." He looked at my daughter, a flicker of something cold and controlling in his eyes. "Don't you want the best for your mother, honey? Don't you want her to have a secure future instead of clinging to this?" He gestured specifically at my armchair. "This sentimental attachment to old things is what keeps people poor." That was it. That was the moment the world shifted on its axis. He wasn't just talking about wood and fabric. He was talking about my life, my memories, the place where I had raised my daughter, where every scuff on the floor was a story. He called my love sentimental, and he called my life poor. I looked at Emily. A single tear was tracing a path down her cheek. She was trapped, caught between the man she loved and the mother who had given her everything. And he was using her love as a weapon against me. A profound, icy calm settled over me. The hurt, the shock, It all evaporated, leaving behind something hard and unyielding. The frantic beating of my heart slowed to a steady, deliberate rhythm. I felt the change inside me, a door slamming shut on the gentle, forgiving woman I used to be. I looked directly at Mark, my gaze level and empty of all emotion. I didn't see my son-in-law anymore. I saw a thief standing in my living room, trying to steal my past and sell my future. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The answer is no, I said. The words were flat. Final. He blinked, taken aback by my lack of hysteria. What? Sarah, don't be emotional. This is a business decision. It's the logical. I said no. I repeated, cutting him off. I stood up slowly, the old springs of the armchair groaning softly. This discussion is over. It is time for you to leave my house. I put a clear emphasis on the last two words. My house. Mark's face flushed with anger. He snatched the portfolio from the table, his movements jerky and violent. You're making a huge mistake, he hissed. You're choosing a pile of old junk over your own daughter's future. He grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her towards the door. She looked back at me, her face a mask of misery and conflict, but she went with him. I stood there and watched them go. I listened to the sound of his expensive car roaring away into the rainy night. The house was silent again, except for the gentle tapping of the rain. I walked over to the window and looked out at the darkened street. He thought he had seen a weak, sentimental old woman. He had no idea what he had just created. He had declared war on my life, on my history, and I would spend every last ounce of my strength to make sure he lost. If you liked this story, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what you thought. I really want to know your opinion. Here you will always find stories that move, surprise, and bring lessons to take with you for life. After the front door clicked shut, the silence it left behind was heavier than any sound I had ever heard. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stood in the center of my living room, listening to the rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof, washing the world clean. The smell of Mark's cologne lingered in the air, an invasive, artificial scent that didn't belong among the familiar notes of old books and lemon polish. There were no tears. The searing pain I should have felt was gone, replaced by a strange and profound emptiness, a void where all the warmth used to be. It was like watching a storm from a great distance. I could see the lightning and hear the thunder, but I felt nothing. My feet carried me across the room, my steps measured and silent on the old wooden floor. I stopped in front of my burgundy armchair. I didn't sit down. Instead, I ran my hand over the armrest, feeling the deep grooves worn into the velvet by years of my own hands, my daughter's hands. He had called it junk. He had looked at this chair, this silent keeper of my most precious memories, and seen only an obstacle to his ambition. He saw a liability on a balance sheet. In that single, cold assessment, he had shown me exactly who he was. He wasn't just greedy. He was a man who couldn't comprehend the value of anything he couldn't sell. That was his mistake, and it would be his undoing. I turned away from the chair and walked to the small oak desk in the corner, the one where I had paid every bill on time for 30 years. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and a black ink pen. The crisp snap of the paper was the only sound in the room. I sat down, my back perfectly straight, and clicked the pen. Under the soft glow of the desk lamp, I started to write. Not a letter, not a diary entry, a list. 1. Loan to M Designs Inc. Amount, $50,000. Date, October 10, 2023. Check No 1432. 2. Verbal contract, repayment within 24 months, with 5% annual interest. Witness, Emily. 3. Business registration, M Designs Inc. I needed to find the incorporation documents, see exactly whose names were on them. My handwriting was steady, precise. Each letter was a small, solid brick in the foundation of my new purpose. The $50,000 wasn't an investment, as he had called it. It was a loan, documented by a canceled check and a verbal agreement made in this very room. He had dismissed me as a simple woman, someone who didn't understand his complex world of venture capital. He saw a sentimental old woman, clinging to her past. He had no idea he was dealing with someone who had spent a lifetime documenting patient charts, where a single misplaced decimal point could have catastrophic consequences. He thought the game was his to control. They won't even see it coming. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the world outside my window was still a uniform, washed out gray. I didn't make coffee. Instead, I drank a glass of cold water, the chill of it a welcome shock to my system. I looked at the list on my desk. 3 simple lines. It was a map, and I knew exactly where the first step would lead me. By 9:05 a.m., I was walking into the downtown branch of First National Bank, the same bank I'd used for over 30 years. The air inside was cool and smelled of recycled air and old money. I didn't go to the teller line. I went straight to the branch manager's office, a glass-walled cube where a woman named Mrs. Gable had helped me secure my first mortgage in 1998. She greeted me with a warm, familiar smile. "Sarah, it's been too long. What can I do for you?" My voice was level, calm. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were an actress playing a part. "I need a certified copy, front and back, of a cashed check from my personal account." It was check number 1432, dated October 10th of last year, for exactly $50,000, made out to M Designs, Inc. Her smile tightened slightly at the amount, but she remained professional. She typed into her computer, the clicking of the keys echoing in the quiet office. "Of course. I can have that for you in just a few minutes. Is there a problem?" "I'm just organizing my financial records," I said smoothly. It wasn't a lie, merely an understatement. A few minutes later, she returned with a crisp envelope. I paid the $15 processing fee in cash and tucked the envelope into my purse. As I held it, I could feel the faint outline of the paper inside. It wasn't just a copy of a check. It was proof. It was the first stone in the wall I was about to build. My next stop was a law office 2 blocks away. The name on the brass plaque read Davies & Associates. I had found him online, a man who specialized in small business disputes and contract law. I paid the $350 consultation fee up front. Mr. Davies was a man in his late 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened patiently for 20 minutes as I laid out the facts, my voice never wavering. I told him about the verbal agreement, Emily's presence as a witness, and the recent conversation where Mark had tried to pressure me into selling my home. I slid the certified copy of the check across his polished mahogany desk. He studied the document, turning it over to look at the endorsement signature on the back. "The good news," he said, leaning back in his leather chair, "is that you have a clear paper trail for the transfer of funds. The bad news is that a verbal contract is notoriously difficult to enforce, especially between family members. He will claim it was a gift. Or, as you said he called it, an investment." My heart didn't sink. I had expected this. "So what do I do?" "We start by establishing intent," he explained. "A gift has no expectation of repayment. An investment implies shared risk and potential profit, usually with a shareholder agreement. A loan is a debt with specific repayment terms. Your first step is to formalize the debt. I will draft a promissory note outlining the original terms. A $50,000 loan, repayable within 24 months from October 10th, 2023, with a 5% annual interest rate. We will send it to him via certified mail. This forces him to respond. He will either sign it, acknowledging the loan, or he will refuse, which clarifies his position as hostile." He paused, looking at me over his glasses. "Before we do that, I want you to find out everything you can about M Designs, Inc. Who are the registered officers? What is the official business address? Go to the Secretary of State's website. It's all public record. Knowledge is leverage, Sarah." That afternoon, I sat at my desk, the legal pad and pen replaced by my old laptop. It took me less than 10 minutes to find the business registry. I typed M Designs, Inc. into the search bar. The result popped up instantly. Document ID 78B422. Incorporated on September 15, 2023. I clicked to view the details, my heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat. My eyes scanned the page, past the registered agent information, past the business address, which was just a P.O. box, and landed on the section titled Corporate Officers. There was only one name listed: President, CEO, and Treasurer Mark Peterson. My daughter's name was nowhere. He hadn't made her a partner. He hadn't even given her a title. She, the inspiration for his dream, the reason he had my $50,000, was not legally part of the company in any capacity. She was a ghost in her own future. My phone rang, startling me. It was Emily. Her voice was small, hesitant. "Mom? I just wanted to call, to see if you were okay." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, my own voice sounding foreign, too calm. "Mark was he gets passionate about our future. He didn't mean to upset you," she said, the words sounding rehearsed. "He really thinks selling the house is the smartest financial move. For all of us." I looked at the computer screen, at the stark black letters spelling out Mark's name as the sole owner of everything. The smartest financial move. For him. "I understand," I said. "But the answer is still no. The house is not for sale." There was a pained silence. "Okay, Mom," she whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice before she hung up. I closed the laptop. I walked into the living room and stood before my burgundy armchair. He had called my love for it a sentimental attachment that keeps people poor. But he was wrong. It wasn't about the chair. It was about what it represented. A life I had built with my own two hands, a history he could not erase, and a home he would not take. My love wasn't a weakness. It was my armor, and I was just beginning to learn how to use it. The weeks that followed were a quiet, methodical campaign waged from my small living room. The burgundy armchair was no longer a place of rest. It had become my command center. The grief for my daughter was a constant low fire inside me, but on the surface I was ice. Every action I took was precise, deliberate, and documented. The passionate, emotional mother had been put away. In her place was a strategist, a creditor, an architect of consequences. The first official move was quiet, almost mundane. On Monday, April 22nd, Mr. Davies finalized the promissory note, Document 2B. It was a simple, one-page document clearly stating the terms: a loan of $50,000 issued on October 10, 2023, with a 5% annual interest rate, due in full by October 10, 2025. I went to the post office myself and sent it to Mark's business P.O. box via USPS certified mail, return receipt requested. The tracking number was 94073,000. I paid the $8.95 fee in cash and kept the receipt in a new accordion file I had labeled M Designs Inc. Collections. It felt good to have a system, to turn the chaos of my emotions into orderly paperwork. My next step was more significant. Mr. Davies had said knowledge was leverage, and I intended to be the most leveraged person in the room. I hired a private investigator he recommended, a man named Frank Miller. He was a retired police detective with tired eyes and a handshake like a vice. His fee was a $2.500 retainer against an hourly rate of $150 plus expenses. I wrote him a check from my savings account, the one I was slowly rebuilding with my nursing shifts. "What am I looking for, Mrs. Nelson?" he asked, his voice a low gravel. I gave him a simple directive. "I want to know how M Designs Inc. is spending its money. I want a full financial picture of its sole officer, Mark Peterson, leases, assets, recurring payments. I want to know where my $50,000 went." He nodded once, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I'll be in touch," he said, and that was that. 4 days later, on a Friday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mark. The green return receipt from the certified letter had come in the mail that morning. I knew he had received the note. His voice was a blend of disbelief and outrage. "Sarah, I just got this letter. From a lawyer." "Are you serious? A promissory note? What is this, 1950? He was trying to laugh it off, to make me feel ridiculous and old-fashioned. The tactic might have worked on the old me. It didn't work now. "It's a legal document, Mark," I said, my voice as flat and calm as a frozen lake. "It formalizes the terms of the loan you requested." "Loan?" "Sarah, it was an investment. You were investing in my company, in Emily's future." He sputtered, his voice rising. "You can't just change the terms now because you have seller's remorse about your house." "I'm not selling my house," I stated, not as a point of argument, but as a fact of the universe, like gravity, and it was a loan. "Emily was there when you promised to pay it back within 2 years. Are you denying that conversation took place?" There was a brief, telling silence. He knew his wife, my daughter, was a witness. "This is insane," he finally said, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. You are going to regret this. You're trying to sabotage me right when the company is on the verge of a breakthrough. I'm not signing this piece of paper. You'll never see a dime." He hung up. I didn't flinch. I took out my legal pad and wrote down the date and time of the call, and his exact words, "I'm not signing this. You'll never see a dime." It wasn't a threat. It was an admission. It was evidence. A week later, a thick manila envelope from Frank Miller arrived. I sat in my burgundy armchair and opened it. Inside were documents and photographs. My hands were perfectly steady as I went through them. The report was devastatingly thorough. Mark, through M Designs Inc., had not leased a modest office space. He had signed a 1-year lease on a penthouse apartment at the Meridian Tower downtown, a luxury high-rise with a rooftop pool and valet service. The monthly rent was $6,800. The lease was signed on November 1st, 2023, just 3 weeks after I gave him my money. The company had also leased a 2024 Porsche Taycan. The monthly payment was $1,250. There were copies of corporate credit card statements. They showed thousands of dollars in charges at places like Le Cirque, Versace, and a jewelry store on Fifth Avenue, where he had purchased a diamond tennis bracelet for $14,200 on December 15th. Emily did not own a tennis bracelet. But the final pages were the most damning. Frank had uncovered the company's bank statements. They showed my $50,000 check being deposited on October 11th. They also showed a wire transfer of $250,000 from an investment firm called Harrison Capital on October 20th. For months, the account was used like a personal piggy bank. There were no payments to graphic designers, no server infrastructure costs, no payroll. There was only rent, the car, clothes, and cash withdrawals. He hadn't built a company. He had funded a lifestyle. I took the envelope to Mr. Davies the next morning. He read through the report, his expression growing grimmer with each page. When he finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me. "This isn't just a breach of a verbal contract anymore, Sarah. This is a classic case of fraudulent conveyance and misuse of corporate funds. He's treating the company as his personal alter ego," he explained the legal strategy. "We would file a lawsuit, not just against M Designs Inc., but against Mark Peterson personally. We would petition the court to pierce the corporate veil, arguing that the company was a sham created to defraud creditors, namely, me." The evidence was overwhelming. On May 15th, Mr. Davies filed the lawsuit in the county court. Civil action file number 24CV01182. We sued for the original $50,000 principal, plus $3,750 in accrued interest, plus all associated legal fees. The filing included copies of my check, the promissory note he refused to sign, my sworn affidavit detailing his verbal promise, and the entirety of Frank Miller's report. A process server was dispatched that same afternoon to deliver the summons to Mark at his luxury penthouse. I paid the court filing fee of $475 without a moment's hesitation. That evening, I went to the hospital to sit with Emily. She was still unconscious, but the doctors said her condition was stable. I held her cool hand and told her about my day, not about the lawyers and the lawsuit, but about the flowers I was planting in the garden for her. I talked about the red geraniums and the yellow marigolds. As I spoke, I felt the resolve harden within me like steel. Mark had used my daughter's name and my life's savings to build a fantasy world for himself. He had built his empire of lies on my money and my daughter's love. I was about to repossess both. The papers had been served. The clock was now ticking, and he had no idea how much more evidence I had left. The summons landed like a grenade in Mark's manicured world. I knew this not because he called me screaming, that would come later, but because the first tremor reached me through Emily's bedside monitor. Her heart rate, which had been a steady 75 beats per minute, suddenly jumped to 92. The nurse and I exchanged a worried glance. I knew, with a mother's certainty, that Mark was in this room, his toxic stress radiating from the phone he was holding to Emily's ear, poisoning the fragile peace we had fought so hard to maintain. I walked over, took the phone from his hand, and ended the call without a word. He was trying to use my unconscious daughter as a shield, as a bargaining chip. It was a pathetic, desperate move, and it only hardened my resolve. His direct confrontation came 2 days later. It was a Saturday morning, bright and cool. I was on my knees in the front garden, my hands deep in the rich soil, planting the marigolds Emily loved. The roar of his Porsche was an ugly, alien sound on my quiet street. He slammed the car door and stormed up the walkway, a sheaf of legal papers clutched in his hand. He wasn't wearing one of his tailored suits. Instead, he was in jeans and a wrinkled polo shirt. His face was pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes. The effortless confidence was gone, replaced by a frantic, hunted energy. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, shaking the papers at me. His voice was a low growl, meant to intimidate. "Civil Action 24CV01182. Are you insane? You're suing me? After everything I've done for your daughter?" I didn't stand up. I remained on my knees in the dirt, looking up at him. I calmly pulled off my gardening gloves, patting the loose soil from my fingers. "Hello, Mark," I said, my voice even. "I'm not suing you, I'm collecting a debt." His jaw tightened. He took a step closer, his shadow falling over me in the flower bed. "This was an investment, a contribution to our future. You can't just decide you want it back because you're having some kind of emotional breakdown." He was trying to paint me as unstable, as a hysterical old woman. It was his go-to strategy. "My emotional state is perfectly clear," I replied, finally rising to my feet. I brushed the dirt from my knees. "You owe me $53,750 plus legal fees. The lawsuit is simply the official invoice." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. It sounded like shattering glass. "My lawyers are going to tear this apart. They'll bury you. A verbal agreement between family? A judge will laugh you out of court. You have no proof." This was the moment he thought he still held all the cards. I looked him directly in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "Proof is a funny thing, Mark. It's amazing what you can find when you know where to look. For example, I have the certified copy of my check, number 1432, with your signature on the back endorsing it into the M Designs Inc. account. The account that, according to the Secretary of State, lists you as the sole corporate officer. Not you and Emily, just you." His face lost a fraction of its color. He hadn't expected me to be so thorough. "That's standard practice for a startup," he stammered. I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "I also have the bank statements showing that my $50,000 was used as a security deposit on a penthouse apartment at the Meridian Tower. Unit 34B. The lease is for $6,800 a month. Is that the official office of M Designs?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air. "Because I also have the lease for your Porsche Taycan at $1,250 a month, also paid from the corporate account, and the credit card receipts. Like the one from December 15th for a $14,000 tennis bracelet from Cartier. Emily doesn't wear bracelets, Mark." The transformation was stunning. The arrogant bluster evaporated, leaving behind raw, naked panic. His eyes darted around, as if looking for an escape route. He took a step back. "You've been spying on me? That's illegal. You can't use any of that." "My investigator is fully licensed and bonded, Mark. Everything he gathered is part of the public record or was obtained legally. It's all admissible as evidence of fraudulent conveyance. That's the legal term for using corporate funds for personal enrichment at the expense of creditors. Creditors like me." I spoke the words calmly as if reciting a recipe. Each fact was a nail I was hammering into the coffin of his lies. He was breathing heavily now, his chest rising and falling. The predator had become the prey. "Sarah, please," he said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Don't do this. We can work this out. Think about Emily. When she wakes up, this will destroy her. It will destroy us." I felt a pang of something cold and sharp in my chest. He dared to use her name now, after everything. "You destroyed us when you left her alone in that hospital bed to party on a yacht," I said, my voice dropping to match his, but mine was filled with ice, not desperation. "You have two options. You can pay the full amount, including my legal fees, within 10 business days, and I will instruct my attorney to drop the civil suit. Or you can ignore it, and we will proceed to discovery, where my lawyer will subpoena every single financial record you have. And then we will discuss this in front of a judge. The choice is yours." I turned my back on him then, knelt down and picked up my trowel. I plunged it back into the soil, ready to plant another marigold. The conversation was over. He stood there for another minute, a statue of impotent rage, before turning and stalking back to his expensive, leased car. As he drove away, the sound of his engine was no longer a roar, it was the whine of a man in full retreat. The final meeting took place on a Tuesday morning, June 18th, in a sterile conference room on the 12th floor of Mr. Davies' law firm. The room was designed to be impersonal, a place where emotions were liabilities. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the gray, overcast sky from the floor-to-ceiling window. I was seated on one side with Mr. Davies. I had chosen my outfit with care. A simple, navy blue dress and the sensible, low-heeled shoes I used to wear on my nursing shifts. I looked like what I was, a practical woman who had come to settle an account. I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes after a storm has passed, and all that's left is the quiet task of rebuilding. My burgundy armchair at home had been my war room, but this polished table was the site of the surrender. Mark arrived precisely at 10 a.m., accompanied by a slick, young lawyer in a suit that looked more expensive than my car. Mark himself was trying to project an aura of control, but it was a cheap imitation. His face was drawn, his movements stiff. He sat opposite me, avoiding my gaze, and focused on a point on the wall just over my shoulder. His lawyer began, his voice smooth and practiced. "Mrs. Nelson, Mr. Peterson is here today in good faith, to resolve this unfortunate family misunderstanding. He has always considered your contribution a generous gift to support his wife, your daughter. However, in the interest of family harmony, we are prepared to offer a settlement of $15,000 to be paid in installments over the next 12 months, contingent on the immediate withdrawal of this baseless lawsuit." I didn't look at Mr. Davies. I didn't need to. I leaned forward slightly, my hands folded calmly on the cool surface of the table. I spoke directly to Mark, my voice quiet but carrying across the silent room. $15,000 is not $53,750. The offer is rejected. Mark's lawyer bristled. My client's offer is more than generous, for a loan with no written contract. This is not a negotiation, I said, my eyes still locked on my son-in-law. For the first time he was forced to meet my gaze. I saw fear flicker in his eyes, and it gave me no pleasure. It was simply a fact. "This is a collection." Mark finally broke, slamming his hand on the table. The sound was a sharp crack in the heavy silence. "This is ridiculous. It's a shakedown. You're a bitter old woman trying to destroy my life because you can't stand to see your daughter happy with someone successful." He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a venomous hiss. "What do you think Emily will say when she wakes up? When she finds out you drove a wedge between us, that you tried to bankrupt her husband while she was fighting for her life? This will crush her. You know it will." I let his words hang in the air, a foul poison that couldn't touch me. I had anticipated this. I knew he would try to use Emily as his final weapon, his last human shield. Slowly I reached into the leather portfolio beside my chair and pulled out a single, glossy 8x10 photograph. I slid it across the polished table. It glided silently, coming to a stop directly in front of him. It was the picture from the yacht. The sunlight, the turquoise water, the other woman, the careless, triumphant smile on his face. His lawyer leaned over to look at it, and a flash of genuine shock crossed his professional facade. Mark stared at it as if it were a snake. He looked up at me, his face ashen. I did not raise my voice. I became a narrator of facts, my tone clinical and precise. This photograph was taken on May 21st at approximately 2:15 p.m. local time. It was posted to a friend's social media account. At that exact moment, Dr. Evans was performing a lumbar puncture on Emily to check for meningitis after she spiked a fever of 104. "You told me you were in Zurich, in a critical meeting with investors that you absolutely could not miss." I paused, letting the timeline sink in. The boat's name, visible on the hull, is the Emily. A nice touch. I believe the woman's name is Chloe. She received a $14,000 diamond bracelet on December 15th, purchased with funds from the M Designs corporate account. My funds. The investors' funds. The room was utterly silent. Mark's lawyer slowly sat back in his chair, distancing himself from his client. He was a shark, but he knew the taste of blood in the water, and it was Mark's. Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was checkmated. He had built his entire defense on the idea that this was a family matter, that his intentions were pure, that he was the devoted husband. That single photograph had burned his entire story to the ground. It was not evidence of financial fraud. It was evidence of a profound and monstrous betrayal, a moral bankruptcy so complete it was indefensible. Mr. Davies spoke for the first time, his voice calm and authoritative. "We have 2 documents for your client to sign, counsel. The first is a confession of judgment for the full amount of $62,100, which includes all legal and investigative fees. The second is an uncontested divorce petition, in which Mr. Peterson waives all claims to any and all marital assets and agrees to an immediate dissolution of his marriage to Emily Nelson. He will sign them now, or this photograph, along with the entirety of our financial investigation, will be delivered to the district attorney's office by 4 o'clock this afternoon. We believe they will be very interested in your client's definition of venture capitalism." Mark stared at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading terror. He saw no mercy in my face. There was none left to give. He had burned it all away on that sunny afternoon on the deck of his yacht. Without a word, he picked up the pen his lawyer offered him. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely sign his name. He pushed the papers back across the table. I stood up, tucked the photograph back into my portfolio, and walked toward the door. I didn't look at him again. He was no longer a monster to be feared, just a pathetic, broken man. As I stepped out into the hallway, leaving the ruins of his life behind me, I felt nothing but the quiet, clean finality of a debt paid in full. Walking out of that law firm was like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into the clean, quiet light of a new day. The air on the street smelled of rain-washed pavement and exhaust fumes, but to me, it was the scent of freedom. When I got home, the first thing I did was open all the windows, letting a cool June breeze sweep through the rooms. It felt like I was airing out the last remnants of Mark's presence, chasing away the phantom scent of his cologne and the memory of his arrogant voice. The house felt bigger, lighter. It was mine again, completely and unconditionally. My sanctuary, not an asset on a balance sheet. 10 days later, a certified letter arrived. It wasn't a legal threat, but a cashier's check from Mark's lawyer's escrow account. I sat at my small kitchen table and carefully tore open the envelope. The paper was crisp, official. The amount was written in stark black ink, $62,100. The full sum. It wasn't a victory prize. It was a restitution. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on the most painful chapter of my life. I didn't feel triumph, only a profound and weary relief. I folded the check, put it in my purse, and went to the hospital. The money didn't matter. What mattered was waiting for me in room 3B. The real victory came a week after that. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, I was sitting beside Emily's bed, reading aloud from an old book of poems, my voice a low murmur in the steady beeping of the machines. And then it happened. A flicker. Her eyelashes fluttered against her cheek once, then twice. I held my breath. Slowly, her eyes opened. They were hazy at first, struggling to focus. Then they found mine. Her lips moved, a dry, raspy sound escaping. "Mom?" It was the most beautiful word I had ever heard. The tears I had held back for months finally came, not in a storm of grief, but as a gentle, cleansing rain. The fight was over. My daughter was coming back to me. Months have passed since then. Emily is home now, her recovery slow but steady. Her laughter, still a bit weak, is starting to fill the house again, chasing away the last of the shadows. The other evening I was sitting in my burgundy armchair, watching her sketch in a notebook by the window. The setting sun cast long golden rays across the room, illuminating the worn velvet of the chair. Mark had called it junk, a symbol of a life that was dated and poor. He was wrong. He saw the frayed fabric, but he couldn't see the strength woven into it. This chair wasn't a relic of a sentimental past. It was my throne. It was the command center from which I had reclaimed my daughter's future and my own dignity. It was a testament to the fact that the things we love, the things we build with our own hands and hearts, have a value that no thief can ever appraise or steal. It was the quiet, solid proof that I had won. My story isn't really about revenge. Revenge is a fire that consumes you, leaving nothing but ash. This was about reclamation. It was about taking back a future that a selfish man tried to steal. Not just from me, but from my daughter. He looked at my life, my home, my savings, my love, and only saw things he could use, assets he could liquidate. He never understood that the true value of a life isn't measured in dollars or square feet, but in the quiet moments of love, the memories held within the walls of a home, and the unwavering strength you find when you're fighting for someone you love. He thought my world was small. He learned, too late, that it was simply impenetrable. The greatest lesson in all of this is that your dignity is the one thing no one can take from you, unless you give it away. Strength isn't always a roar. Sometimes, it's the quiet, steady resolve of a mother with a legal pad and a clear purpose. It's knowing when to be silent, when to document, and when to present the undeniable truth. Never let anyone convince you that your experiences, your memories, or your love are sentimental junk. They are your foundation. They are your power. If you liked this story, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what you thought. I really want to know your opinion. Here you will always find stories that move, surprise, and bring lessons to take with you for life.